Hey everyone, it's Nerdstalgic again. I want to say thank you to everybody who watched my first video for Path of Exile Sorted. Uh, I've listened to all of your feedback and I've gotten some good feedback and some things that maybe I could change to do a little bit better, so I'm going to take that into account. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to keep the videos a little bit shorter, a little bit more of a hit and run type thing. The first one I was actually a little bit unhappy with the length. I didn't realize how long it had went on until I'd finished recording, and by the time that I'd finished recording, I was like, well, I'm not going to re-record all of that because it was quite long. So in today's video, I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter, a little bit faster. We're going to cover a topic that's a little bit of a smaller breadth for beginners. Today's topic is going to be currency. We're going to dig in a little bit more on the specific types of currency in the game, using what I have in my currency stash for my character that's currently in the Warband League. There will be a currency type or two that I do not have. Those are going to be the currencies that are very rare, and chances are as a beginner you would never find them, and if you did find them, that would be amazing and congratulations, but you probably won't. I'm speaking mainly of a Mirror of Calandra, which will duplicate any item in the game. Those are very rare, very expensive, so if you were to find one, congratulations, you're instantly rich. Anyways, let's get started. So, as you can see, this is my stash. I have 3 different stash tabs set up right now for currency in the game. And I've got them set up from, of course, least expensive to most expensive. Anyways, I'm not really going to go into the methodology of why I spread everything out and why I do the things I do. That's not really what I'm here for. I'm here to teach you a little bit about the particular currencies. So, let's start at the beginning. First currency we're going to look at is called a portal scroll. It creates a portal to town. Imagine that. Portal scrolls are useful because you can also take them to a vendor and sell them to a vendor, and you will get a trade back for a wisdom scroll. So let's do that right now. So if I go over here to Haku and I click sell item and I drop this over here into my offer, you can see now Haku is offering back scrolls of wisdom. This is important because as you progress in the game, what you'll notice is that you use a larger proportion of scrolls of wisdom compared to scrolls, portal scrolls, especially if you're lucky enough to find a portal gem. Anyways, so this can be something that might help you as you're playing through the game, because I know that I find myself running out of scrolls of wisdom fairly regularly, and I don't really want to pay for them from people, so I end up using this vendor exchange quite often. So let's put this back in here. Next up is the Scroll of Wisdom, and as you can see, I'm running quite low. I've been actually having to exchange portal scrolls. But a Scroll of Wisdom will identify any unidentified item in the game. This also includes lock boxes and strong boxes that you'll find when you're adventuring. These are important because you want to identify your magical items that you find to see if they are worth selling to other people or using yourself, or just selling to a vendor. Obviously you can choose to sell those items without identifying them, but it becomes a bit more of a crapshoot, and you get something a little bit different from the vendor when you sell it to them. Next up is an Orb of Transmutation. This will take a white item and it will upgrade it to a magic item. It will upgrade it to a blue tier magic item. Remember, we talked about in the last video that there are 4 color tiers, and each tier has a different classification. When you see something in the text here that says normal item, what that is referring to is a white item. And magic item, even though it's a bit confusing, because really you feel like the yellows and the legendaries are magic too, Whenever you see it in this text, it's actually referring to a blue. So if you use an Orb of Transmutation on a white item, it's going to change it into a blue item. This can be pretty useful, especially when you're trying to make sure that you have certain affixes on items before you actually spend some money on crafting them. These can also be good for rolling white lock boxes and strong boxes that you find out in the wild. Orb of Augmentation, what this will do is it will take a magic item, so blue, a blue item only, and it will enchant it with a new random property if it has the space for it. A magic item, so a blue, can have two affixes. So if you look at this item, underneath where it says requires level 67, yada yada yada, you can see it's plus 160 to accuracy rating, 76% increased armor. Those are what are known as affixes. This item, you can see, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 affixes. That's because it's a yellow. It's a rare item. Rare items can have up to 6 affixes. Blue items, on the other hand, can only have 2. So if you try to use this Orb of Augmentation on a blue item that already has 2 affixes, it's not going to do anything. So, Blacksmith's Whetstone. These you use on weapons to improve their quality, which in turn, quality of a weapon will improve its damage. Weapons can be improved up to 20% quality. Now, an important note with Blacksmith's Whetstones is you get more bang for your buck when you use them on lower magic items. What that means is if I use this Blacksmith's Whetstone on a white item, every time I use one, I'll get 5% quality. So it will only take 4 whetstones to take an item to max quality. If I wait until it's blue, I only get 2% for each whetstone. So now we're looking at using 10. If you wait until it's yellow, or if it's a legendary, it's going to take you a whole stack, 20, to get it there. Now, these aren't really expensive, but that's just a little tip that can help you. Just keep that in mind. It's always better, especially if you're crafting, to go ahead and put the quality on it first when it's white. Armor Scrap. This is basically the same thing as a Blacksmith's Whetstone, except it improves the quality of armor. Also, they do stack up to 40. Same rules apply. You always want to put quality on something, if you can, when it's white. Glassblower's Bauble. This is the same thing as what we just saw, except now this works for flasks. These are flasks. Now, remember, flasks do not come in yellow, so they're either going to be white, blue, or legendary. So you want to use these, if you're rolling your flasks, if you're making magic flasks, you want to use these when it's white. That's just kind of the rule. Whenever you're going to be crafting anything, you want to put the quality on it before you actually put the magical craft into it. So let's move to the next tab. Now we're going to start getting into stuff that has a little bit more, it's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more intricate. Chromatic Orb. This reforges the color of sockets on an item. What that means is, I guess I could show you here. Let's take these boots. Now it's only one socket, so it's probably gonna stay blue because it has the requires level 35 int. So this is an int based item, and when you roll colors on items, it tends towards the stat that the item requires. But we'll see. So I'm gonna click on this. It's a right click, and then I'm going to left click on that. Oh, and it changed to green now. So when you use this on an item, it re-rolls the color of all sockets on the item. So it can be very useful. Let's see how many it takes to get back to blue. Probably not many. Yeah, just one more. The next up, Orb of Alteration, and these are one of my personal favorites. I use them quite often. It reforges a magic item with new random properties. And what that means is if you have a blue item, this won't work with yellow or legendary. You use it on blues, and it completely re-rolls the affixes on it. You'll see this used a lot with maps. So I'll grab a map, just any old map, a 69 sewer. And what we do, now it's white. Now I'm not going to quality it, because to quality a map you have to use a currency unit that I'm going to show you here in a few minutes. It's a little bit more expensive, so you don't want to start qualitying maps until a little bit higher level. So the first thing we need to do, if we want to craft on it, is we need to, we need to make it magic. So we're going to use one of these Orbs of Transmutation. And you can see it added quantity and rarity to it and gave it 2 affixes. Area has patches of shock and ground monsters, deal 69% extra damage as gold. I'm not going to go into map affixes and things like that. This isn't how to craft your maps 101. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back over here, and I'm going to say, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that at all because my cold resistance is really low. I'm afraid of this map for whatever reason. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to right click it, and then I'm going to left click. And see, it re-rolled, but it gave me it took 1 off and it gave me extra damage as cold again. So I'm still thinking I'm pretty scared. So what you can do is if you hold down your shift key and right click, and then keep the shift key held down, you don't have to click back over actually into the stash again. You can just left click, look at it, and then if it's something you don't want, left click again. So let's see what happens. Okay, so this time we got skeletons. Skeletons, I'm thinking, oh, I can handle skeletons. So anyways, what I would do after this is I would probably augment it to add another affix to it, because when you're running maps, you want to have high quantity. Anyways, we're not getting into that. We'll just leave that in my bag. I might deal more with that later. So that shows you how to use an Orb of Alteration. Now, it's not just maps, it's also items too. I don't have any blue items here to show you with, just because this is intended just to be a quick hit. Next up, we got Jeweler's Orbs. It says Jeweler's Orb reforges the number of sockets on an item. It does exactly that. If you use it on an item, it's going to re-roll the number of sockets on that item unless it's already at the maximum number of sockets. So if I had a chest that was 6 sockets and I tried to use the Jeweler's Orb on it, it's not going to work. If I tried it on this, it would work. Something to know though is that it can lessen the number of sockets too. It can reduce it. So you have to be careful. Also, you cannot change the number of sockets on an item that has been corrupted by a Veil Orb, which we'll see here in just a minute, that unit of currency. Alright, next up we've got the Orb of Chance. Orb of Chance upgrades a normal item, so white, to a random rarity, random. So what that means is, when you use this on a white item, there's a chance that it'll make it magic, so blue. There's also a chance that it will make it rare, so yellow. And there's a teeny tiny chance that it might make it legendary. Now you can always know what legendary it might become if you look at the base type of the item. So let's say you find an occultist vestment laying on the ground, and this is something that people do. You find a base type occultist vestment when you're running around killing monsters. You pick it up, you hit it with the chance orb. It could be a blue, it could be a yellow, or there's a chance it could become 2 different legendaries. It could become an infernal mantle, which I have on right here, or it could also become a Chavron's Wrappings, which is a very expensive item. Actually, it said Widow's Silk Robe. Maybe they changed that. Anyways, I'm not worried about that right now. Let's move on. So, Orb of Chance Can be cool, can be fun to use, but don't go hog wild with it, because it's a really, really small chance that you're going to actually hit a legendary on that. Usually Orb of Chance is better saved up, probably for new players, to be used as trade currency with other players. Cartographer's Chiseled, this is kind of what I was talking about when I said putting quality on a map. You see it says improves the quality of a map. Same rules apply. If you hit this on a map when it's white, you're going to get 5%. Blue, 2%. Yellow, 1%. Legendary, 1%. So these go for a little bit more money. They're also a little bit harder to make than the other ones too. So you only want to use these when you need to use them. And you know, different people have different schools of thought about, you know, when do you chisel a map. So I'm not really going to go into that, but if you get any of these as you're running around, and you probably will, just stash them up. They can be really good trade currency for dealing with other players, or, you know, once you get to mapping and, you know, you feel confident with it, you could even chisel your own maps. So Orb of Fusing, these are very, very useful. They reforge the links between sockets on an item. You know, if you look here at this this wand, we'll just play with this wand. So first you got to take out the gems, and then you can see here it's got 3 sockets, but only 2 of them are linked. Well, I want all 3 linked, so I'm going to click on it, and you can see it linked it up immediately. It's not always that easy. The more sockets that there are on the item, the more chances that it's not all going to get linked. You know, this was very simple. Even up to 4 links is pretty easy to get, but when you start looking at wanting to 5 link things or 6 link things, it grows exponentially harder. So keep that in mind when you're using your fusings, because you could potentially take an item that's usable and screw it all up. If you're trying to link, you know, get like a 5 link or a 6 link, and you started out with a 5 link, and then whenever you burn through all your fusings, and now you don't even have a 5 link, so you're worse off than where you started. So you just have to be a little bit careful. Next up, Orb of Alchemy. These are what you use to take a white item and turn it into a yellow item. So if I use this on a, you know, like a white dagger, it's going to come out being a yellow dagger. So, and it will roll anywhere from 3 to 6 affixes. So you could get really lucky and get some great affixes. You could get very unlucky and you could get some poop affixes. It's completely RNG, completely random. So, Orb of Scouring is remove all properties from an item. So what this will do is, if you use one of these Orbs of Alchemy on a white item, it becomes yellow, but the affixes are very, very bad on it. And you want to keep that white item and craft with it again, you would use this Orb of Scouring on it. It would take all that off. You would just be left with that white item. So then you could theoretically use an Orb of Alchemy again. Blessed Orb, excuse me. Blessed Orb randomizes the numeric values of the implicit properties of an item. As you go through the game, you'll see different base item types have different implicit values, and these are the values that you will always see on that item. Let me see if I have any here. Yeah, okay. So if you look at this wand, you can see right under the part where it says requires level 60 gem, 131 int. In between those 2 kind of golden bars there, it says 13% increased spell damage. That is an implicit on this item. Any item that is an engraved wand. If you look up at the top, it says Demon Call, which is the name of it, and then underneath that it says Engraved Wand. That's the item, the base item type. Any wand that is an engraved wand base type will have an increased spell damage roll, but it's not always going to be 13%. There's a range that it can be. Let's say you got a really good base, but a really, really bad implicit, and you wanted to craft with it, then what you would do is you would use this Blessed Orb on it. Chaos Orb, this is kind of like the dollar of the Path of Exile world. It's kind of like the standard. Things are often priced in terms of how much chaos. What this does is it takes, kind of like how an Orb of Alteration did for blues, like you used an Orb of Alteration, this, remember, on a blue, and it re-rolled all the affixes for a blue. This does the same thing, but for a yellow. It will re-roll all of the affixes. Now, Chaos Orbs, you don't want to just run around using them willy-nilly, because they're not cheap. I mean, they're harder to come by. So if you're using this on an item to re-roll the affixes, you better know what you're doing. Otherwise, it's definitely best if you just kind of stash these and use these to trade with other players. Next, we got the Veil Orb. Veil Orb corrupts an item, modifying it unpredictably. These are kind of the wild card of the game. They can be a lot of fun if you know what you're doing, but if you don't know what you're doing, don't use them. Because they can, just like it says, it can modify an item very unpredictably. I'm not really going to go into everything that they can do, because they can do a great many things, and some of them to very, very good use. But for a new player, Veil Orb, just know that it trades pretty well with the Chaos Orb, and leave it at that. Regal Orb, what a Regal Orb does is it takes a blue item and will upgrade it to a yellow item. You know, if you're crafting and you want to start with a blue item to make sure that you get the affixes that you want, and then you would craft it up to a yellow. Something to know about a Regal, though, is when you take an item using a Regal from a blue to a yellow, it's not like using an Alchemy where it can roll up to 6 affixes. The Regal is only going to add 1 affix to it. So for a new player, a Regal really is just really should just be a currency item, probably. Orb of Regret, these are what you use to gain passive skill refund points. All you have to do is just right click it, and it will add it back into your passive skill refund point total. So Gem Cutter's Prism, this is what you use to improve the quality of a gem. So you just right click it, apply it to a gem, and it will increase the quality of the gem 1%. 1%. Remember, we talked about last video, gems don't have rarity tiers. There's not like like a blue tier, a yellow tier, a legendary tier. All gems, the only thing they have really is quality. So GCP, this is the short for Gem Cutter's Prism. You use those to improve the quality of a gem. So I would just probably hang on to these if you were a new, as a new player, or if you had a gem drop that was like quality 19%. Often it can be a pretty good idea to use a Gem Cutter's Prism on that gem if you're going to sell it, because sometimes, like the psychology behind people buying things, they'll pay a great deal more for a 20% gem than they would for a 19% gem. But you'd have to look on the market and see what that particular gem is going for. Divine Orb. What a Divine Orb does is, you know how we talked about a Chaos Orb, how it takes the affixes on a rare and completely re-rolls them. What a Divine Orb does is it takes those affixes on an item, it leaves the actual affix type the same, but it randomizes the numeric value attached to them. So if I was to use that on this wand, it would still have fire damage, cold damage, it would still have lightning damage, it would still have cold damage to spells, cast speed, and spell damage at the bottom, but all of those numbers would change. Could change in a good way, could change in a bad way. So, and last thing we're going to cover today is Exalted Orb. These are pretty much the highest currency that a new player might see, and as a new player, it will probably take you a while to get an Exalted Orb. They're very rare to drop from monsters. Normally, most people get them from trading. You might get like a drop that'll sell for an Exalt, which, congratulations if you do. And what an Exalted Orb does is it takes a yellow item, a rare item, and say you've been crafting on the item, you used a Regal on it, now it has 3 affixes. Remember, yellow items can have up to 6. So you really like that item, you're crafting on it, you hit it with an Exalted Orb, boom, now it has 4 affixes on it. But it's random, so this can be it can be a really expensive mistake is what I'm saying. So as a new player with Exalted Orbs, please don't use them for crafting, just use them to buy things. Crafting in Path of Exile can be very, very complex. It's best to get into it when, number one, you have a lot of money, and number two, you have a lot of experience. Because nothing can be more defeating than getting in over your head and realizing that you've used up all your currency and you have an unusable item now. So, anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Like I said, this was just intended to be a really quick shot for beginners in regards to currency, what the currency does. Yes, the currency does have other applications than what I've showed, but for a beginner, this is what I feel like you need to know. And you know, next time maybe we'll go into something a little bit deeper, but for this time, that's what it's going to be. Thanks again for stopping by and watching, and I'll see you next time. Game on.